Okay, welcome. All right, everybody, I apologize. I'm going to get the team back on here. For some reason, we had an issue with Restream, so just please bear with me one moment. Okay, can you all hear me now? And is this coming through okay? All right. Hey, Phyllis.
Hello. Looks like the chat's working now.
Chat's working. I think we lost most of our audience, unfortunately.
Oh no.
But we'll get it recorded, and hopefully people will refresh YouTube and find their way over here. Let Gary get in, and we'll get going. Again, sorry about that, folks. I'm not sure what happened with Restream this week, but it did not play the way I wanted it to. Let me just. As soon as Gary gets in, we'll get going.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Scott.
No worries.
All right, where is Gary? All right, Eric, thanks for letting me know, Mr. Sun. Appreciate everybody's patience. Let me see if Gary got the. We will get going in just a moment. Huh. There goes Gary. Waiting on a host. We are all here. So fun when technology does not.
I know, right?
Let's see. All right. All right, Gary, thank you. Thank you all for your patience. And once again, this is a first. We had this a lot with Crowdcast, but this is a first for Restream. So let's, with time ticking away here, let's get on into it. And this week, Scott posted something. It was an article from Federal News Network that I thought it was really fascinating, and that's what we're going to unpack today in the title. And I'll put the URL in shortly. And thank you, man, for letting me know. Yeah, I appreciate you letting me know. And something happened, so hopefully they'll see everything. Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate you guys doing that. So as we let people come in and start to talk about this refocusing CISA under the Trump administration, a lot has gone on. Things that have affected everything from Phyllis's organization, indirectly CIS, which is home of ISAC, the electoral ISAC. Obviously, we've seen things as far sweeping as the removal of the Department of Education. There's a lot going on in federal government right now. While we just wait for a few more people to come over, I did want to open this up, Gary, with I'm surprised that you didn't buy Wiz, but it looks like Google outbid you at the 32 billion mark for the largest security transaction ever. Ever is a long time, Garrett. But what? Any thoughts on so like acquisitions have really quieted down, right, in
Yeah.
this market, and then
I bid 31,
that's
and my wife said that's as far as I could go.
Smart woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's hard to know what to like. You see some of these things, these valuations, but as you said, Andrew, it's kind of the exception to the rule now, right? It's quieted down a lot based on some of the results of some of the at least at that high level. So it'll be interesting to see what the future holds.
Yeah, Scott, 4 years though. Wiz started 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, a category, by the way, like other organizations like Orca Security had a lead, but I listened to, I think it's called Off the Wall, with Chamath and some other guys as a podcast. It's really well done, and they were saying it was, Gary, this goes to point, but I want to get Scott's comment on this first. But I do want to ask you this, Gary. Execution, like it was about how the company just the experience, everything from the UI, how the integrations, that's what they really talked about, that they just outmaneuvered everybody so quickly and so well.
Execution is so critical. But 4 years from 0 to 32 billion is just insane. That is just a crazy path. I've seen a lot of people commenting and wondering, Wiz made, their big thing was the cross-platform nature of what they do, right? And are they going to maintain or be able to maintain that same level of expertise cross-platform, within the Google umbrella? What is that going to look like, right? So I've seen, just in the last few days, and Reddit is what Reddit is, right? But I've seen a lot of people talking about, hey, do I need to be finding a new provider because everything's going to be moving to Google through Wiz, and we've got Wiz today. Do I need to be looking somewhere else? So there's a lot of uncertainty within the ecosystem as a whole, I think, about the acquisition. And Gary, you said, or maybe Andrew, it was you that said that the M&A transactions have kind of been depressed, if you will, for the last 12 to 24 months. It's been there hasn't been a lot going on, and I think that may have something to do with why their valuation was so high. There is a lot of money sitting on the sideline right now, and not a lot of it is flowing. And all of these firms, they've got to get that money to work. And so when they find a target, I think that the right targets are going to get significant valuations well beyond what they would have gotten 5 years ago.
I mean, you still see money flowing into businesses like MSPs, right? And other sectors that are based on multiples of EBITDA. They'll go up and down based on interest rates and market, those kind of things. But where you see these wide fluctuations are these companies that are, valued as a multiple of sales. And you just, especially now as money gets more expensive, even though there's a lot of money on the sidelines, they feel a much higher level of risk, even though I think the level of risk is the same, but the environment has changed.
Just one last comment, Gary, because I think there's always relevance, like for, big business, but the lessons learned, right? But to the point of execution, like, we hear commoditization, et cetera, but isn't this a strong lesson that Wiz isn't the only one, and yet they executed better. So that lesson for MSPs.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're an MSP, the two lessons I would have is one of the great, the downside of an MSP is it's not like if you hit a software company and it just turns into 32 billion or $1 billion or, there's limits. But the other side of it is you're not really affected by too many things, competition, economy, those kind of things. You pretty much, your plan is based on execution. And if you understand that, and number two, that all companies are go-to-market companies. They're not software companies. They're not service delivery companies. That every company is a go-to-market business. And if you tie those two threads together right now in the MSP business, where it has a expanding TAM, you can achieve whatever goals you set down if you have your plan.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, let's get on into it. So thanks for everybody shifting over here. Looks like we got the a bunch of the audience back over with us. Thanks for the patience. And we are going to get into today's topic. And in doing so, Scott, for those that may not know you, could you do a brief intro? And as always, maybe just start off with I love thank you for your service. I love starting off with being a West Point grad and some stuff that's going on with your family too. That's awesome as well. So, but take it away.
Yeah, sure. I'm the CEO and founder at Summit 7. We're an MSP focused in the defense industrial base and federal contractor base. So we specifically support, the DIB, which is one of the critical infrastructure sectors. So anything that, anytime we're talking about CISA and, regulatory requirements around critical infrastructure and supporting critical infrastructure is something that we're very interested in. Also, one of the directors for the MSPs for the Protection of Critical Infrastructure, which is a group of MSPs that we're putting together that focus specifically in that sector. Because believe it or not, federal government does not understand ESPs very well. They don't understand MSPs. They don't understand MSSPs. They many times get them confused and conflate ESPs, MSPs, MSSPs with CSPs like Microsoft and Google and Amazon. And we're very different animals, right? And so we try to do a lot of bringing that specific ecosystem together to communicate to government, to communicate to industry, to communicate to the critical infrastructure sectors about what we are and what we do. And, the benefits of working with an ESP, things like controlling costs, and the risks of working with ESPs, and government needing to understand what those risks are when they're putting regulations in place. That's really critical. So, it is. It's a very interesting, very exciting place to be right now. There's a lot going on, obviously, with the administration change and everything that the administration is changing within the ecosystem, and then also the changes that have been working their way through the process, through the system over the last 2 to 3 administrations. That some of those things are finally coming to fruition. Things like the CMMC requirement for the defense industrial base, the FAR CUI rule set that is going to impact all federal contractors. All of those are kind of in the world that we deal in.
So Gar, as I hand it over to you, I think in Jacob Horn's words, who works for you, Scott, the sausage has finally been made and a lot is changing. I think, again, Gar, and I'll put the article in there that Scott, put up. And I think this is the thing, like a lot of times people think, defense industrial base, as soon as it's CISA and critical infrastructure, kind of like default is, okay, it's CMMC, it's the DIB, but by and large, Phyllis, right, we're talking north of 60% of critical infrastructure being supported by MSPs. And this is a big area that is not just about defense industrial base. This is where, MSPs that are water utilities, SLTTs, you name it, that financial, et cetera, right? This is going to have ramifications.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, we've said it so many times that MSPs really are supporting the backbone of this nation, which are those small mediums, to include those smaller government entities, not just big federal agencies.
Yeah, good. Garrett, over to you.
So let's first talk. There's a lot going on with DOGE. I'm going to put air quotes, Department of Government Efficiency. So can you give us like a little overview of some of the proposed changes that like you're aware of with CISA, with the Trump administration, and some of the what have you made? Can you make a rationale out of it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of changes going on. I think everybody's pretty well aware of, just kind of what feels chaotic in a lot of ways of how DOJ and the new administration are going about implementing changes. Is it chaotic? It feels chaotic. There's been, for example, impacts to Phyllis's organization in CIS, right? The Elections Infrastructure ISAC, as well as the MS ISAC, both either being defunded or losing funding. The comment across the board has been that the administration wants to remove overlapping missions and agencies so that we're not paying for doing things in multiple places. I don't necessarily agree that those were overlapping capabilities that were out there. I don't know who else is doing the MS ISAC and the EI ISAC work today. I don't know who else would be doing that outside of CISA supporting CIS to do some of that work. But I think that there, to some degree, there is an idea of, and I think we've seen this across the board with a lot of different, things that are going on right now within the administration, of essentially cutting and then asking questions and then bringing things back at some point in the future at either a reduced rate or something like that. So I think that we may see some of these things come back at some point, but there is a need or a desire to make a lot of cuts right up front and then bring back the pieces that are determined to be essential at a later date. And it causes a lot of churn, if you will, both from an employment standpoint.
People got to find other jobs. Like they got to go on with their lives. They can't wait around to see whether they get called back, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I know that, a lot of these agencies have had employees called back, in the last week or so. And, some of them aren't available to be called back. They found other jobs already, which is great for them, right? They had marketable skills and they were able to go find new jobs, and that's all great. But it could have a long-term impact on, certain missions within the government. As a whole, I support, the idea that they have of getting rid of overlapping missions, and support and, not paying for two or three different agencies to do the same exact thing. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? There needs to be coordination and harmonization among the agencies. It just hasn't been done in a very coordinated fashion, I don't think, thus far. So, for example, you look at rules that are out there right now, like the CISA rule. The CISA rule that I think, Andrew, you had, is actually talked about in the article that you posted, that I posted about. There are a lot of reporting requirements that are overlapping with reporting requirements from other agencies. And that causes absolute challenges for ESPs, for the MSP community, and for just industry as a whole, because of, having different timelines for reporting, having different data that they have to report to different agencies, all about the same exact incident. That needs to be fixed. CISA probably does need to be the center of that, reporting scheme, and then they can distribute out to the rest of the federal government. But right now, all the agencies are not playing ball together, right? DOD and SEC and Department of Homeland Security and CISA, they're just not all working together on the same page, and haven't for administrations now. This isn't a recent administration problem. This is just a whole of government problem, where every agency wants specific data that they're interested in a very specific way that they want it, on a very specific timeline that they want to receive it. And every single agency has a different standard. And that makes it really, really challenging, to share data with the federal government in an appropriate manner.
So it seems like there's a mandate, right, for CISA to focus on its core job, like what its core role. At the same time, there's reductions, so it's kind of counter. Like, how realistic do you think that they can do a better job with less resources? And what do you think will be some of the gaps in critical infrastructure based on that?
Well, there's always going to be some level of funding that may not be as being used as efficiently. So I think that there is a general idea that there may be funding that can be better used within CISA. I know, for example, the review board that was put in place, and I believe Michael talked about this in his article as well. The cybersecurity review board that was put in place and was funded by CISA was not super effective. The reports that they put out were dramatically late, not useful by industry because they were so late. And there were criticisms that essentially that review board was just a place for cybersecurity influencers to essentially, rooster tail, if you will, to feel like they are, important. And so I think that, Michael called for in the article, hey, we need this capability needs to exist, but it needs to exist in a different way, and it needs to be more effective than it is. So I think that there are ways that you can find funding within CISA and redirect that funding to make it more effective, if it's done in an appropriate manner.
Gotcha. So the critical infrastructure, I'm going to read this one, Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advocacy Council, right? Gets disbanded, if I'm correct through this. So what was the purpose of that, and what do you think it means?
What was the purpose of it? I don't know that any of us know the actual answer to that question. Phyllis, maybe you can answer, maybe you can step in on a little bit of that if you've got any insight into what the actual purpose of the disbanding was. I don't have any inside information on what the thoughts were there. Like I said, some of the cuts seem random. It's really hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's difficult because if there's not like watch guards and no checks and balances in place, I guess we'll continue to see some of that.
And in some cases it may be, and this is me just complete supposition at this point, because I don't really know. It could be that they're looking at removing. While on one hand they say they want to do public-private partnerships, and that's something that's really important. That's on one side they say that. On the other side, you see funding to nonprofit organizations being cut that are part of that public-private partnership ecosystem. The CIS is obviously a 501c3. It is not a government agency. And so we were having, there was funding coming from CISA directly to CIS to fund EI, ISAC, and MS ISAC. Did they go through and look at and specifically target funding going to nonprofits and then just cut that funding off? And so MS and EI, ISAC got caught in that. I don't know. It's a possibility. And then they're looking at redistributing that funding within the organization. That could be one way that they're looking at doing it. I just really don't know.
Garrett, I mean, it just seems interesting, Scott, your point. For example, I heard this morning that there's talk of, and there's a point to me saying this, there's talk that, hey, all the pharmaceutical ads, right, are going to, get shut down, right? And interestingly, from a Trump perspective, a lot of the news networks weren't his, favorites that would necessarily show those ads. And so that's a kind of a double win, right, for both sides. But it would seem also that the electoral ISAC, which, is, supporting the Constitution, of our country, that literally all funding, not some, all funding to that organization just got obliterated. That's pretty alarming.
I'm certainly not here to as a spokesperson for the administration in any way. I really have no idea why they chose that, those specific line items.
Yeah, it's strange.
I guess in the end, what this means is more of a shift towards, state and local governments having more of the responsibility around cyber defense, right? So what do you foresee that means for MSPs that work with these entities? And I know many of them. Yeah,
I mean, I think that kind of goes along with the entire administration approach of, pushing things out of the federal government and pushing it toward, state governments to handle, federalism, right? That's pretty consistent with what, the administration's view has been in lots of other areas, is, shrinking federal government and, pushing those decisions and those controls down to state and local levels. What is that going to mean? Is it's going to mean, you're going to have potentially, more different organizations. If you're working, across multiple states, you're going to have multiple different organizations with different standards and different needs and requirements that you're going to have to work with as an MSP. And that certainly is going to bring its own level of challenge. We need to be harmonizing these standards. We need to be, getting to the point where, we're doing the same thing across the board rather than coming up with 50 different standards, right? One for each state. That would make things extremely challenging for, multi-state, MSPs that work in multiple locations. So,
Yep.
Not something that I would certainly think that is going to be efficient. I know that, there are things like the state ramp program and some other things where they're trying to get multiple states together to do things in the same way. But even that, there's a lot of confusion with that and how that, contrasts with the existing FedRAMP program as well. So,
Garrett, I got the question back to you. You sit on boards of some very large PE-backed MSPs that are multi-state, if not, Canada and US type. So like when you look at this, all of a sudden it's in the state's hand and state A says one thing, state B says another. Like, how do you look at that as an advisor to if these potential things come to roost?
Yeah, I mean it's a big potential problem. The only other side of it is I don't think things will change even more slowly because the states don't really have the resources to take on anymore. So I think the result will be kind of everything that we've been seeing, talking, Phyllis, about kind of working forward to get this momentum. I think it'll get stalled, and I think it's probably a pretty good day to be a bad guy.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
good day to be a bad guy. Good day if you like election interference. You probably have you have a window probably going forward where it'll be easier, not harder.
It's going to be one of these, again, reactions, right, Garrett? Like things are going to have to get bad. And then, oh yeah, maybe we should have not removed all the funding for this agency, right?
Listen, with all the funding and all the inefficiency, just in the time that we've been doing this podcast, we've seen slow, but we've seen motion in the right direction, right? Come. And so very hard to gain ground. But it's really easy to give up ground and even harder to gain it back. So this is definitely, I would say, I don't think anyone would say that this is not a setback for critical infrastructure, cybersecurity defense. I mean, I don't think that's a political statement.
No, but Scott, just one more thing before I turn it over to Phyllis. There was some, posturing in the article that, or from the Trump administration, which this I kind of agree with, that like CISA's mission kind of got diverted. Like, hey, you're out on social media, you're getting involved with things that really aren't targeted with your core mission. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, is there some truth to that area where they're saying, hey, that your job is to protect the country and critical infrastructure. Your job isn't to be political in nature.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, as we see the administration making changes, I think that there is a movement within the administration as well to protect some of the cybersecurity rules that are being put in place from change and modification. Because there's been requirements to remove regulation. For every regulation you add, you have to remove 10. Those kinds of ideas that have been floating around within the administration, and I think that there is a recognition within the administration as a whole that that does not work very well when it comes to cybersecurity, simply because we are so far behind the 8 ball on attackers having the upper hand against our critical infrastructure, and we need to be implementing additional controls, additional capabilities. I cannot justify that with some of the cuts that we have seen within CISA. It's really hard to do that. So, on one hand, you hear people within the agency saying one thing, and on the other hand, you see cuts being made within CISA without any real explanation of what's going to happen to those cuts and where those dollars are going to flow. Could there be some connective tissue on the back end where that funding is going to another place where it's going to be better used than it's being used today? Is that possible? Yes. Has that been talked about or advertised? It certainly has not yet, not that I've seen. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens, I think.
Yeah.
I love Scott's optimism. It's very cute.
I mean,
You're adorable, Scott.
Well, I have to be optimistic because the situation is dire out there, and I know that I know people within the administration, and I know where their heart is at, and I know what they think and how they feel about things, and the conversations that I have with them, and they want to do the right thing, and so I have to have optimism that those individuals are going to have the impact that they should be able to have, and we're going to see that over the long term. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of the things that are happening right now seem very chaotic. Ultimately, the chaos is going to have to calm down, and then we'll see where the long term impact is.
Awesome. All right, Phyllis.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just make one commentary about misdisinformation. That originally came out of elections, and it really was about what would happen is there'd be mis or disinformation saying this local elections place is closed down, so don't go there. So that's where that kind of spun out of, was to say, oh, that elections facility isn't closed down. You can vote, because there was an effort to not necessarily change votes, right? So votes weren't changed, but to influence results by trying to get people to not vote in certain areas. So that's why I think CISA was involved in that. It may have expanded since then, but that was really the origination, was to make sure that people knew things like that kind of mis or disinformation, they could make it to elections. All right, so given the reduction in federal oversight, what do you think the implications on CMMC or requirements that recently passed FAR clauses and that went into effect? How are these changes going to affect these types of federal regulations?
Sure. As of right now, I don't see any negative impact to those regulations. The 32 CFR, which was the program rule for CMMC, that was, that went into effect in December. So that is fully in effect. Certifications have been ongoing since the beginning of January. So that is, the certification aspect and the program itself is all, 100%, moving forward. The regulatory freeze that happened, that's a pretty standard thing that happens across all administrations at this point. When an administration changes, the administration comes in, puts a regulatory freeze on everything so that they can ensure that their people review the regulations that are on the way out rather than, the old administration. That regulatory freeze is over now. It ended on March 21st. So the regulatory freeze is over at this point. The final rule for the 48 CFR rule, which is the rule that will put the CMMC requirement into contracts for defense contractors, is expected, really any day at this point. Anytime between now and I would say June is kind of when we would expect it. That's the rule that will actually put the requirement in contracts. I don't foresee any impact to that final rule. You see who has been brought into the DoD. Katie Arrington is now the CIO at DoD. She obviously is, one of the, biggest engines behind CMMC all the way back to 2019 in the first Trump administration. I do not believe that there's any way she would have taken that position if she thought that CMMC was going to get killed. I mean, it is one of her babies, right?
Yep.
So I don't foresee any change to the CMMC program based on the administration change at this point. As far as the FAR CUI rule goes, the FAR CUI rule, the proposed rule was out. The comment period just closed last week on the FAR CUI rule. So now it'll go through its process of, comment, answer, and then, releasing a final rule. We made comments as part of the MSPs for protection of critical infrastructure. We had a set of comments that we sent in on that rule. It was a few pages long. You can go to the mspcollective.org website to see those, or you can go actually pull it off the comment website for the rule itself. There were, I want to say, I think there was somewhere around 80 comments total which is way less than the CMMC rule had. There weren't that many people that commented on the FAR CUI rule, but that one is continuing forward as well. I don't expect to see significant change to that rule either. Some of the things that I did not like in the FAR CUI rule were some of the reporting timelines. Some of the reporting timelines are, not really, something that could really be effective. Things like 8-hour reporting timelines on incidents or suspected incidents, whereas DoD within the DFAR 7012 rule gives you 72 hours. 8 hours, and even within the rule, they say that, it's going to take at least 4 hours for you to prepare the information needed to report. Yeah. So, that's just not really a great timeline there. So.
Yeah, Scott, I'm just curious with that. How, this is your business, like this, you focus on this. Mm-hmm. How do you, one of your clients has an incident. I mean, by the time you get, forensics, investigation, like it, how do you handle that? I mean, it's
going to be really challenging. You're going to have to do a lot of automated work to be able to meet something like that. And I don't know that I have all the answers on that yet. That's one of the reasons why we made the comment that we did. They need to make these reporting timelines standardized across the agencies, and the data that is being reported needs to be standardized across the agencies, because it's very feasible that, if we are supporting a defense industrial based company that is a publicly listed on the stock exchange company, it's very feasible that we would have to report different information to the SEC, to the DoD, and to CISA, all on different timelines. And that's just for 3 agencies. And there's others out there as well, right? Which it just really becomes very, very difficult for any kind of, not just a company, but for an MSP, especially if you're doing it for multiple companies, right? That makes it really, really challenging. And the only way you can get there is through harmonization, and most likely through some automation as well.
Yeah. Then you didn't even mention things like PHI or things that would be reporting.
Yeah, I mean that's So if you're talking about a publicly traded, health system that is doing work for the VA or the DoD, now you've got 4 or 5 different agencies that you got to report to, and that's really, really challenging.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Phyllis, more fun. Over to you.
Yeah. So do you see these changes, creating any opportunities or hurdles for MSPs? For example, there could be an increased demand of services.
Sure. I mean, anytime that there is, challenges or confusion or information asymmetry within a market, there's opportunity, right? It's just a matter of what opportunities do you as an MSP want to take advantage of, because it's going to require pretty much any MSP involved in the ecosystem to significantly up-level what they're doing today to meet the requirements that the government's asking for, that the critical infrastructure sectors are asking for, CISA, DoD, whoever it is going to require significant up-leveling of the existing MSPs out there. MSPs, the majority of the MSPs in the ecosystem are small. The majority of them are very small. Sub 20 employees in most cases, I think, right?
Sub 10.
Yeah, I mean, and so the sub 10, even sub 20. I mean, I know some sub 20 employee MSPs that have done things like CMMC and getting ready for CMMC. But think Axiom, right? Axiom with Bobby Guerra, great company, small team. They've done great work in uplifting themselves to be able to support the ecosystem. But it's been an all of company effort for them, and it's all they focused on for a couple of years, right? If you're a sub 20 employee MSP and you're not willing to put in that level of effort and that level of focus, then you probably don't want to be engaged in that ecosystem.
Yeah. He's done a phenomenal job. Him and Andy Sauer too, right?
Andy Sauer, at Sentinel Blue. Andy's done a great job. I mean, there's a number of smaller MSPs out there that have done it and have done a really, really good job with it. Yeah. And that I would have no qualms about, pointing pointing people to go use, right? They've done a great job, but they have had unusual focus, laser focus for years to get there.
Yeah. By the way, they both reached out to me, and I think let me know in chat, but they wanted to come on and talk about their certification process, what it was like to go through. For a smaller MSP. Let me know if you guys think that would be an interesting. I'd love to have them on so you guys could hear the level of effort. It's almost like on a different note, Eric Woodard's 2,000 to 3,000 hour investment in CIS, right, Phyllis? It's just staggering what some MSPs will dedicate. So
I mean, Bobby has a podcast, and I think he's talked about it. He and Andy actually, I think, were on the same. I think he had Andy on his podcast, and they talked about it for one of the episodes. So. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Phyllis.
Yeah. So also in the article, it calls out fostering public-private relationships. So what steps do you think MSPs should take to make sure their teams are prepared to handle the evolving cybersecurity landscape resulting from CISA's reorg?
Yeah, so public-private partnerships, I think, are really important, and this is a place where I know CIS has played a lot. Played a big role with EI-ISAC and MS-ISAC. This is a place where our organization, the MSP Collective, or also known as MSPs for the Protection of Critical Infrastructure. This is the same place where we play as well, right? And so, if you are an MSP that is interested in this ecosystem, you're interested in this market segment, this vertical. Come see what we're about and engage with us, because we are engaging with Congress. We are engaging with the federal agencies. We are engaging with the marketplace to do some of the things that you see in this article around public-private partnerships and talking about how we as commercial entities can support the mission of CISA, can support the mission of the DoD and of DHS and of Department of Energy in getting the supply chain that we support those federal agencies. Getting that supply chain secure and compliant is really important. But we need to make sure that Congress and these federal agencies understand what MSPs do and why they do things the way they do them and how they can do them better, and how government can interface and engage with MSPs and MSSPs in a better and more collaborative way. That's really important. And so, come get engaged with us, get engaged with CIS. I think that both of those are really important ways to engage in these new public-private partnerships that the current administration feels like are important.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what do you think are the long-term implications of these changes for the cybersecurity industry as a whole? I mean, we talk about, DHS, and then CISA, of course, inherits the authorities, which are over all, the 16 sector critical infrastructure. A lot of times we focus on DIB because of CMMC, but we know it's larger than that. And certainly the MSPs are servicing all those sectors, right? We've got healthcare, IT sector, so MSPs are a part of that sector, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think that we've got to do is continue to tell the government to, I've said this word probably a dozen times already, harmonize, right? All of these agencies need to get on the same piece of paper. Even within the FAR CUI rule, which, the FAR Council, which is made up of NASA, GSA, and DoD, got together to release, the FAR CUI, the proposed FAR CUI rule. It does not even have a requirement for third-party attestation within that requirement, within that rule. So under DoD, we have the DFAR 7012 clause that requires the implementation to NIST 800-171, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have the CMMC program that is the third-party attestation that a company has implemented the standard appropriately. Well, under the FAR CUI rule, currently as written in the proposed rule, they have the 800-171 requirement, but there is no requirement within that rule for any third-party attestation. And we know exactly what happens when there's no requirement for third-party attestation. People don't do the work. It's just, they just don't do it, right?
Which is why we had to have CMM, which is why the DoD implemented CMMC.
That's why we have CMMC. Now, the worst possible thing that could happen would be that each individual agency comes up with its own third-party attestation program. And so now MSPs supporting DoD and Department of Energy and all the different agencies have to go through 3, 4, 5, 6 different certifications to be able to support that ecosystem. That would be a disaster. They need to come up with a single standard. Leverage CMMC, don't leverage CMMC, but pick a standard for third-party attestation and let's move forward with it. It's the same thing that's right now. We're seeing the exact same thing happening with Canada. Gary, you were talking about you have MSPs that support, Canadian organizations as well as US-based organizations. Well, Canada has just released their CMMC program, right? It's called the CPCSC. And that program is actually baselined on NIST 800-171 Revision 3 instead of NIST 800-171 Revision 2. And so now we have, if you're a DIB contractor supporting Canadian organizations and U.S. organizations, now you have to meet 800-171 R3 for the Canadian certification, and you have to meet NIST 800-171 R2 for the U.S. certification. That really makes it very, very challenging for DIB organizations supporting the Canadian federal government and the U.S. DoD.
Wow. So Scott, you mentioned the word harmonize. I feel like you said a few times. This is obviously a little bit of a hyperbolization, right? We had 9/11, right? And post 9/11, we said, wow, all these departments, if they only talked, what could have been, right? This company knew this, this department knew this department knew this. We should all be working together. I mean, granted, this is not kinetic war, but we know there's impacts to kinetic war from cyber. I mean, is it almost like did we not learn something, from those types of dismantling of, keeping these organizations cohesive?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the long arc of all of these policies, I mean, even the NIST 800-171 requirement on DoD, that is an outflow of 9/11, right? From 9/11 to the executive order that President Bush put together, followed by the executive order from President Obama, followed by implementation of 800-171 for DFAR 7012, and then CMMC under Trump, and then the finalization of 32 CFR underneath Biden, and now we've got the FAR CUI rule, and all of that's going to happen under the second Trump administration. If you look at the long arc, the things are moving in the right direction. Okay. But you've got to pay attention to the long arc of progress, and you can't look at the individual blips. It's just like looking at the stock market, right? You have days it goes up and it goes down. We make progress forward. We move backwards in certain areas, but the long arc of it is that the market grows. I think it's the same way around cybersecurity in, both in the federal government, but also within the larger commercial ecosystem. My concern is that we're not going to get there fast enough. We're doing the right things and we're going in the right direction long term, but it's going to take too long. And the first thing that's going to happen, when China decides that they're going to take Taiwan, the first thing that's going to happen is not going to be missiles headed from China to Taiwan. The first thing that's going to happen is they're going to take out the electrical infrastructure of the United States. They're going to take out the water systems in the United States. They're going to take out the internet infrastructure in the United States to shut down our ability to respond to their coming kinetic war in Taiwan. That's what's going to happen first. They're going to shut down our ability to respond. They're going to, distract us with things in local, domestic issues, and then they're going to make their move on Taiwan. That is exactly what's going to happen. When is it going to happen? We don't know. But my concern is that we're not going to get our overall critical infrastructure secured fast enough to be able to protect against that.
Yeah, because that's not going to take 10 years or probably even 5.
No, it's not. I mean, it would not surprise me to see it within this administration.
Agree.
Yeah.
All
right.
I would say, DHS was created as a result of the 9/11 Commission, right? And that's why you have a singular agency that has authority of all overall critical infrastructure. I will say I was there when NIST was charged with creating one cybersecurity framework for all organizations that want to do business with the federal government, right? All critical infrastructure. And I don't know if anyone has ever worked in a standards body, or if anyone sees whenever something that's like a regulatory framework or a regulation that's coming down. I'm sure, Scott, it's serious politics. you've got every sector in there fighting because they're unique. And so we've kind of created this mess ourselves where energy will come in and say, oh, no, you can't write that regulation that way because we're special. You'll have, water come in, you'll have, IT sector come in. Every major sector comes in to try to get something like the NIST CSF, to be at a high level. Why is the NIST CSF the way it is today? It was written that way on purpose because all the critical infrastructure came in. They were like, oh no, you can't write something specific because you never considered this. You never considered this, right? And so, for as much as we complain because we're in the IT sector kind of supporting everybody, right? But we did kind of create this mess ourselves where the different sectors come in and fight for their own thing. And they all say we're special, right? So, I mean, that's part of it. It's not all of it, but that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's that way when anytime you're talking about any kind of service industry, every customer comes in and says that they're special. Are they special? Are they really special? They think they're special.
Right. But this is right. This is our argument with the controls. Like, do something small. Like there's commonality across all the different frameworks, which is why we map to them.
Yeah.
Right. And so you should have like a baseline. And then if you want to be special, be special. There's like Appendix A for you, Appendix B for someone else, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, and that's what NIST 80171 was built at, right? It's a baseline control set. That doesn't mean that you can't go above and beyond it, but it's a baseline control set. And DoD has decided that they're going to take specific pieces of NIST 80172 to enhance the framework for, the higher level 3 of CMMC, right? So each agency could go above and beyond, but we need to standardize on a single baseline.
Yep.
Gosh, yeah. So I know we're coming down the last few minutes here, Gary. I'm going to ask you I got one, question to you, and then we'll close it on out. But your thoughts on MSP messaging, from a go-to-market sales conversation. How would you recommend? I know how much you want to start getting back in and starting your third MSP, and but no, if you were, you have a lot of peer members, like what ones that are dealing with critical infrastructure. What guidance might you share here, knowing these changes?
Look, I don't know. Other than I think we've been trying to get people right on the right track with what we talk about here, and what standards they need to adhere to. So I don't think they can change their strategy based on, what an administration's done, at least until we see how it settles out. Mm-hmm. And I think we're a ways away of it. And so I think they need to, stay their course with what we know to be true in terms of protecting their customers. And those that deal, I mean, Scott can say those who are dealing in DIB, they're going to just have to be a lot more watchful. So to make sure that there's nothing that's going to impact their business, whether it's overall or on a state by state basis, that they're going to need to adapt to. So they're going to have to be much more vigilant.
Yeah. Scott, any closing comments on your side? Thanks by the way, for coming. Always awesome having you.
It's great to see you, Scott.
Yeah, good to see you guys as well. And thank you for the invite, Andrew. I mean, I would just encourage everybody to go read that article that was that I commented on that kind of started this this whole thing. But Michael McLaughlin is definitely a thought leader in this space. He knows the players. He's having really good conversations internal to the administration right now, and I feel very comfortable having him, having those conversations within the agencies. So, read that article. It is, it's got a lot of really good ideas in it. And I think, again, over time, the long arc, if you will, of cybersecurity within our ecosystem is moving in the right direction. There are always going to be ups and downs, and we just have to stay the course and continue doing everything you can do to continue to secure your MSP, to secure your purview of influence. And then if we all do that, at the end of the day, we'll be stronger tomorrow than we are today.
Great way to sum it up, Scott. Awesome. Thanks a million. Everyone have a great week. Phyllis, thank you for coming on. Scott, look forward to having you back again very soon. Yar, have a great day. Everybody have a fantastic week. Take care.
Thank you.